Welcome to today's Connection Reflection, where we metabolize rich spiritual food for the sake of mental health. And today we're going to be taking a look at the concept of intentional communion. And I really encourage you to go on and check out our first podcast, because our first podcast is going to be all about intentional communion and what it really takes to make that up. But I think a lot of times, especially as Christians, we look at the idea of communion. We might look at the idea of communication, if it's in businesses or schools or in families, the idea of community, the idea of being able to function together. And yet at the heart of that are some really key ways of interacting with each other, which the podcast will break down for you. But I just want to, particularly at this point in our shortened time, talk about the concept of intentional, right? So how many things in our lives really happen well if we leave them to chance to happen? If we leave them just up to kind of take care of their own? Kind of nothing really, at least not in my life, unless I put some intentional thought behind it and kind of direct my actions, my prayer, and just kind of my mindset towards accomplishing something. It doesn't really happen just kind of by accident very well. The weather does, but I don't really think of anything else that does. So we need to begin to think about that concept of communion, community, communication, and how that takes some really concrete setting aside the time and the energy and the thought behind relating to ourselves in a way that fosters communion, that fosters health of relationship. And yes, we do have a relationship with ourselves that's really key and crucial. We'll talk about that in the podcast as well. Communion with one another and communion with the Lord, right? So I just want you to kind of today, just kind of posting this one on Saturday, but that's okay, whatever day you're watching this, really just consider that concept of intentional. How intentional am I about being connected to the other person in a healthy way who I'm communicating with? And that's as simple as a transaction in the grocery store, or interacting with wait staff in a restaurant, or anybody that we encounter throughout our day, maybe coworkers, colleagues, family members, and particularly our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with God. How intentional are we about that communion? It's at the absolute core of what gives us fulfillment in life, what plugs us into that sense of being loved by God, that then allows His love to flow through us as we accept that, as we embrace that and allow ourselves to be embraced by it, and then allow ourselves to be instruments of that to each other. How intentional is your communion with yourself, with God, and with others? Take a listen to our podcast. We have more time to flesh that out, and just rest in the fact that the Lord is profoundly intentional about His communion with you this day. God bless you.